Thanks a lot for joining us today. I am Adam. I am going to be hosting today's webinar, which is Co-Founder Therapy with Rolanda Dennis. Rolanda, just being fully transparent, she is actually a SCORE client of mine, but she is here to talk about the ups and downs and the positives and negatives and challenges of being a co-founder. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you, Rolanda. So go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away.
All righty. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you for holding space for me this morning. And as Adam stated, I will be speaking on co-founder relationships, good old just relationships in general, and how exciting and how much fun they can be, and lessons that we can learn about ourselves and others as well, and how to navigate through these complexities. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And then let me know if you all can see it. Are we good when you're in? Okay. And so again, my name is Rolanda. And I am a eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapist, EMDR trauma therapist. And I'm also a sound and vibrational healing therapist practitioner, where I integrate these practices into my business, which is Manifestation Wellness. I've been doing the world of therapy and therapeutic modalities for over 20 years. Working very closely in the community with families, youth, adults of all ages, individuals from various backgrounds, whether it be entrepreneurs or people that are working within various, business modalities and things of that nature. And so what I focus on is helping everyone understand themselves deeper, their self-awareness, regulating their emotions, manifesting the goals that they have set for themselves, and just who they are and who they want to be, because everyone has experience in various different environments, and that is what has formed our life and who we are. And when we join together, we bring all of that to the table. And so let's talk about the relationship aspect of things, and why do these relationships matter, right? You can be a founder and just be independent on your own, but then also having that co-founder with you, you're bringing two great minds to the table. You have the ability to think outside of the box together, and having that assistance with the implementation and sharing your visions and elevating to higher levels, as opposed to just doing it independently. But there are some things that are really, really, really important in doing that. And that's making sure that we are communicating, that we have this trust for one another, and that we're not getting in a competitive mindset, but more of a mutual respect, mutual vision. Let's do this together. We're looking to move forward together. And so, as we know, that conflicts are inevitable, right? And we do want to build this harmonious relationship to have greater outcomes. And some of the things that are important in having this co-founder relationship is creating a safe space for vulnerability. I think we all understand how it feels to not be able to be ourselves, our authentic selves, and speak what we're really feeling and what we're really seeing, right? And so being able to have a space where we can be vulnerable with each other and know that it's a judgment-free zone. It's safe for me to say, these are the things that I'm encountering. These are things that I'm dealing with. This is how I need to be supported, and have that honored and be able to also honor the other person. It allows us to not get caught up in our own thoughts and conclusions on things, because we're building a stronger sense of understanding for each other and the other person. I'm sure we've all experienced seeing someone do an action and immediately we have this thought of like, oh, well, they did that because blah, 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 without having the interaction of what is really going on in that person's mind. And so when we create that space, and that could simply be being transparent with one another and knowing that there's a level of comfort there to be able to communicate. And so we want to also spend unstructured time together where we are able to get outside of the office, get outside of the business, and learn this person a little bit deeper, and then allow them to learn who we are as well. So it makes it easier to be able to address anything that we may notice. We want to be able to address these things right, like straight away before it begins to get really, really big. We want to talk about it in advance. And again, having that safe space and allowing to have a time to just be able to bond makes it a lot easier for us to be able to say, hey, this came up and I wanted to talk to you about this. I wanted to see, like, you know, what was the purpose of the action behind that? Or maybe I misunderstood. I don't want to go to jump to conclusions about what I perceived. Number 3 is establishing clear communication channels, right? And so maybe it's not, you know, talking over the phone or via email. We are speaking in person. And being able to see the body language, understanding the texture and the tone of the communication that's being had, and being able to assess ourselves. How are we feeling when this individual is having this conversation with me? And then being able to ask that partner, that co-founder, how are you feeling when I say, when I express myself? And keeping a firm understanding of what brought us together. What is the vision? What is the mission? What is the purpose? These type of relationships are a lot like marriage, right? And so the business begins to be the child. And for those of us that are, you know, we know about marriage, right? And the details that go into it, we begin to find out a lot more about each other as time goes on within this co-founder marriage type of relationship. And so then we want to get ahead of the potential conflicts. We know that conflicts are going to happen, right? We experience that in all types of relationships that we may have, even outside of business, in our personal lives, with our kids, with our spouses, with our parents, with our siblings, all of these things, right? And so it's important to understand, what are my triggers? What are my triggers and what are my co-founders' triggers? Being able to identify these things helps us notice, again, what we're feeling in our body, having this sense of self-awareness so we can be intentional with how we want to move forward. What are the next moves that we want to do in regards to this? And so we want to identify what we call, in our holistic community, we call it shadow work, right? And it's a way of doing like a self-assessment. What type of leadership style do you have? And what type of leadership style does your co-founder have? Or a potential co-founder. We want to understand that, because when we know what type of leader we are and what type of leader they are, it helps us better to merge together if this is going to be a good fit for both of us. If this is something where we can see ourselves harmoniously joining together and being able to move forward for the purpose of the business. And it's not going to be a hindrance. It's going to be growth. What is our communication style? How do you communicate? And how does the other person communicate? Some people are not very vocal, right? They may have challenges really expressing verbally what they are feeling, whereas the other person can be very verbal. And for that person that is very verbal, that other person having the silence can come off as like, okay, you're not invested, you don't care type of mindset, when that may not be what it is. How is there something in the way that I'm presenting what my feelings or next steps that I would like to engage in for the business? The way that I'm saying it, the texture and tone of that, is it something that you feel is kind of like micromanaging, overbearing, or is it just like, oh my gosh, it's too much, or it's right along? How can we blend our communication together where there's a level of mutual respect and understanding for one another, and be able to just be in flow state with our next moves? What are your non-negotiables? What are some of the things that without a shadow of a doubt, like, this is a no-go for me? If we don't know these things ahead of time, if we don't establish these things ahead of time, when it happens, it can be very catastrophic within the relationship. It can break a lot of trust. It can break a lot of potential connections that are already in place or that could be coming. And then our boundaries. What are your boundaries? What boundaries do you have or would you like to set in place in regards to the relationship that you have? And this is another way of finding out what your non-negotiables are, right? And so in this, you can establish what could be called a co-founder agreement, or thinking like a relationship prenup, as stated in the presentation. What all of these things are for you and bringing it to the table. I always like to tell people, anytime you're about to engage in business with someone, you want to make sure that you're having someone like an interview, right? Because you don't want to assume that this person is thinking like you're thinking and that you're on the same page fully. You may be on the same page to a certain extent, but looking at the bigger picture and growing with this person, being able to sit down and have it in writing of like, this is what we're agreeing upon, and I understand where you're coming from, you understand where I'm coming from. Being able to check in with each other, weekly or bi-weekly, or however that schedule permits, to make sure, hey, what are you noticing? Doing a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly evaluation on the operations of the business and the handling of the business. What's working and what's not working, and how best can we move forward in that? Because it does have a huge impact on not just you, but the co-founder and the business as well, and those that are engaged in it, your staff or faculty or whatever you want to, however you want to identify them. But again, understanding what your triggers are, and then having a deeper understanding of like, okay, this is my trigger, but where does that stem from? And is this still a safe place for me to operate in while I'm doing, business? Our next one is going to be our framework for conflict resolution. And so we have a co-founder conflict ladder, right? On this ladder, we want to pause and regulate. We want to notice the emotions that are rising up. Again, what are our triggers? If we're feeling something that's discomfort in our body, where we're talking to, the individual person about what have you, what are you feeling, right? And if you are feeling a sense of disturbance in regards to that, let's take a breath, take a step back, and choose how best we want to engage in a healthy manner. Number 2, name, don't blame. Being able to use I statements. I feel this. I feel, or what I see is, allow for there to be open conversation of, this is how you're feeling, or this is how you are seeing things, and allowing that individual person to come back and say, actually, this is what I was aiming for. This is not what I was trying to imply, but I was actually looking to go in this direction with this. Again, it could be a misunderstanding. So sometimes when we immediately go at blaming people for situations, it puts everyone in a defense, right? And so now we're talking to each other, but we're not actively listening to what the participant is having to say. We're responding for the intent of being able to say something and defend ourselves, as opposed to being able to actually listen to what's being said. And so that goes next into seeking understanding first. Listening without fixing. Listening, getting it all out, having a sense of understanding and clarification, and then moving into a solution type of mindset. And so we want to identify the core need. What is it that is needed right now? What do we need right now for this particular situation? We want to recognize, we want to have clarity, action, security. Like, what are we doing? I hear what you're saying. I hear how you're feeling. This is what has come up. Okay, let's work together and align our action with figuring out what is the next best step in that. And so that goes into our agree on our next steps. Choosing to align in action, not just compromising, because when you're compromising, you are allowing yourself to just let it pass, but that's not building comfort and safety within your body. What happens is it's going to build building blocks of mistrust or lack of ease within yourself. And then at some point, bam, there we have an explosion. So we're not wanting to compromise. We're wanting to come to a common ground, something that we can both agree upon, and then moving forward from there. And so that goes into our solution focus approach. Communication, right? Communication is huge, all types of communication. So we want to have action versus talking in circles, or just kind of, we want things to be, bam, solidified, like let's figure it out, right? And so when we have this solution focused approach, we can implement the framework of SMART goals. That's what that was supposed to say right here. I apologize, but it was supposed to say SMART goals. So we want to be specific about what we are wanting to do, what we're looking for, right? This is maybe what the problem is, or even if it's not a problem, this is what the new thing that we're wanting to implement. So we want to be specific about it. We want it to be measurable. We want to make sure that the validity of this is going to be like, yeah, we can do this within a certain amount of time, like a time frame or what have you. We want to make sure that it's attainable. Is this a really realistic thing that can be done? And what can we put into place to have that done? How relevant is this to what we are doing in the business? If we are a dentist office and these are the particular things that we typically do, and we're wanting to add in a new service, does that change? Does that pivot the direction fully? Does it still fit within the scope of practice? Like, oh, we have a dentist office and we want to incorporate yoga. Like, does that really fit into the vision and the mission? Does it fit into the framework? Is that relevant? And then put a time on it. How long is it going to take for us to, get to this situation or this attainable goal that we're looking to implement? What does that time frame look like for us? And so, excuse me, making sure that when we're using these SMART goals, it helps remove some of the emotion that's in there, and it keeps us focused on exactly what we need to be focused on and moving forward from there. Being able to have, that brainstorming, that conversation, again, how can we move forward for the best of the business and go from there? And so our next one is building and sustaining trust. And so we want to, again, focus on our boundaries, right? We want to look at boundaries in all aspects of our business. How are we intellectually respecting ourselves and respecting the other person? How are we feeling about the material things, the things that are being handled within, whether that be money or machinery or just whatever, when it comes to the actual content of the business? Time boundaries. How are we doing with time of executing things or showing up for each other, or the amount of time that's being put in from each individual, founder and co-founder? How is that panning out? And what are your expectations around these things, right? Starting off on a lower scale of testing these and implementing the boundaries to make sure that this co-founder is going to be able to follow through with what their words are saying. They're actually able to put action behind it. You want to build on the smaller things before we can even jump into the larger aspect of things, and being able to grow that bond together, right? Building that co-founder type of intimacy relationship within the framework of things. And so being your best self, becoming the best co-founder, so that way you can attract the best co-founder, right? Or being the best founder so you can attract the best co-founder. And so this also looks like, again, having that self-awareness, knowing who you are, so you know what you're bringing to the table within yourself, your value, your worth, your expertise. You're looking for someone that's going to have the same type of confidence within themselves, right? Understanding that there is no failure. There are lessons. Everything that we do has a lesson behind it. What is the lesson that we are taking away from this, in this relationship, in the situation that we're working with, in the growth of the business? What is the lesson? Always being able to be teachable. And so I am a professor, and I always tell my students, I learn from you just as much as you learn from me, because my mindset is not the same as the other person's mindset. And so I need to be open to being able to hear and receive feedback, whether that be corrective or whatever it may be. I need to be open to that. And so being teachable and remaining that way, knowing that this is a lesson, is a great way to strengthen yourself. Being able to manage the emotions and the amount of energy that you are putting into the relationship and into the business, and making sure that it's also being matched to the best of that person's ability. What capacity do they have to be able to operate in and put in work for the business as well, and you knowing the same about yourself. And then staying focused on the goal. Again, using the analogy of marriage, sometimes when you hit that 5, 10, 15, 20-year mark, you kind of have to remind yourself, this is why I fell in love with this person, right? This is why we got married. In this situation, this is why I picked this person to be the co-founder with me. This is These are the strengths that they have. We're paying attention to the vision and the strategies, and we may be evaluating or reevaluating what has been set in place. Is it still working? Is it not working? What do we need to change? Evaluating and reevaluating the operations and the systems that are set in place. How is this working for us? Getting back to understanding what our strengths and our limitations are. You may be better at the technology aspect of things, whereas I may be better at the network and the strategic planning of things, and being able to join those things together, right? Sales and partnership, branding and storytelling, all of these things that go into building the strength of the business. What are the strengths and limitations that each of you have, and how best can we merge together to have a smooth partnership together? And so now, do we have any questions about anything that I've just gone over?
And y'all can, if you want, just open your mics and ask questions if you'd like.
Sure, I've got one. I was curious, I think sometimes on the founders group and some of the other things, folks are sort of evaluating, hey, is there an opportunity to collaborate? They're in the early company formation stage. Do you maybe have some suggestions, recommendations around, if you're sort of assessing whether someone potentially is a good fit to collaborate with, are there some steps one can take to sort of identify, yeah, it's a good fit, or no, it's really not, sort of early on, so that you're not going, 3 months down the road and kind of going, gosh, this collaboration is more frustrating than, like beneficial to both participants, that kind of thing? Because I'm curious to hear kind of what your thoughts or suggestions are on that, and if there's such a thing as like, a co-founder checklist, if you will, so that you can, or compatibility assessment, what your thoughts are around that, because that's where I've, in my own experience, trying to collaborate with people, sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. I've seen actual co-founders like start companies and then the co-founders implode, and one of them leaves the business or the other one pushes them out, so there's this kind of co-founder conflict. I'm curious if there's any sort of tips about, how can you sort of get a sense of that ahead of time before you're too far into the weeds with the startup idea or getting external investors, whatever that might be, when you're just sort of forming that initial team and you're thinking, this person may be a good candidate to work with. Let's maybe collaborate on a trial basis and see how that goes. But it'd be great to kind of get your thoughts on, how do you sort of spot some of those early red flags where you're like, oh boy, both people or one person's going to be kind of frustrated because there's a fundamental mismatch in like working styles or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with doing a trial run, starting off with, as I stated before, like low risk things, right? So maybe there's an opportunity to engage in some fundraising or what do you call them, like conferences, different things that represent the company or what have you, and seeing what that person's engagement is like when they are around your stakeholders or other partners that are involved. Getting a deeper understanding of what their full purpose is, like what's your goal, right? Because not everybody's intentions are pure. We can have this ability to want to see the good in everyone, but after we are having them kind of get their feet wet for a while, and that honeymoon period is over, their true colors start to like show. So being able to ask those real life questions of like, hey, like why do you want to be a part of this movement that I am starting or engaging in? Or why me? Why would you like to pick me to create something, right? And I also think identifying more deeper questions or concerns that you may have, and actually asking, like being straightforward and asking those questions, because based on how that person is interacting and answering, it's going to show you if this is something that you really want to engage with, or if this is something that you kind of want to move back from, right? And so I'll give an example with my business alone. I have a lot of people that contact me and they're like, oh, you know, I would love to come and do this, and I would love to come and do that. And it's like, okay, are you really focused on doing this for the sake of pouring into the community? Or are you doing this as a way for your own personal gain so you can get whatever you need and move from there? And I don't have a problem asking that straight out, because if this is something where the motive behind it is for you to do your own thing or have your own growth outside of me, okay, well, maybe there's a way that we can, you know, partner in that without you risking the stability of my business, you know what I mean? And so I think being able to have those open and honest and being very assertive, right? Because we put a lot of time into our businesses. There's a lot of time, there's a lot of money that's invested. And we don't need anything or anyone that's coming in to have a setback in what we have done. If you're not going to be sincere and authentic about it, we don't have time for it. Being able to be assertive, and this is my baby, this is my business. What are your true motivational intentions behind that? I don't know that I have ever seen a like co-founder checklist, but I would think of it being as like almost like an interview process, but without having to, like, maybe you could meet at Starbucks and have that open, like, hey, let me just tell you, this is how it is, this is how I am, and going further like that. But I do think that getting the fluff out of the way and honing in on who this person is and what their true motive is going to save a lot of time. And that goes back into setting those boundaries right off the bat. If you know what your non-negotiables are and what your boundaries are, and you put that on the table, you can't, that it's like a shield from anybody being able to come and do the opposite of what your expectations are, and moving forward from there. Did that answer your at all? Was I close?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that helps. I was curious because I think, Adam, on the Discord channel, there were some discussions where people like take a Myers-Briggs self-assessment test and they're like, oh, I am this. I'm curious if there's any sort of, studies in like which of the Myers-Briggs personality types, will like mesh well together versus be butting heads, because some people will take those surveys and they're like, oh, I'm introverted versus extroverted. Like, can you pair up an introvert with an extrovert and it works, or it doesn't? I'm kind of curious because in one of the recent threads on our forum, people are like, oh, they at some point you might have taken a Myers-Briggs type indicator test. And so you maybe know what that is and like what your own attributes and preferences are. But then I'm curious if there's been any sort of studies or sort of, experience around which types match and which types, will be like a recipe for conflict.
Yeah. I want to say yes, but I cannot recall the name of it right off the bat. And it's interesting that you brought that up, because I remember we did the assessment in undergrad, and that helped us figure out like who was the introvert, who was the extrovert, things of that nature, which all of that can also change over time, right? As you get older, like all of these things change. And I do feel that like, even if you are an introvert and that person is an extrovert, having that knowledge can be very helpful, because again, that goes back to the strengths and limitations. So I'm not going to expect for you to go out to networking events and as a way of marketing the business, or getting out there and setting up, resource vending tables at conferences to talk to people, because socially that just may be uncomfortable. That's more traumatic than anything. And so if that's the case, then okay, what do you feel like you have the capacity that you can do? But I also feel that identifying, so there's different quizzes for like leadership styles, like what is your leadership style, and like what is your communication style as well. And so researching the different types of quizzes that they have on that helps you better identify where you stand and how you can pursue with the next person, and having them be able to do the same thing. I have had my students do personality tests every single semester, and I at least have 20, 30, 40 students in each of my classes. And the majority of them have been like, yep, this is pretty spot on. I mean, some of the stuff's kind of like, yeah, maybe not. But it's been pretty accurate for the most part, type of thing. So I always think that those are really good places to start, and even be able to start with engagement and conversation. And so we also have this thing that's called PIE, P-I-E, which is person and environment. We all develop our sense of self and our personalities based on the environments that we grew up in, or that we've been in, right? And that has really nurtured the nature of like who we are as individual people. And so when we are engaging with others, we have to have an open mind about what their background is and how they have been taught to handle things, because that's going to show up in their business aspect of things, right? And so something else that I've learned is that so every day is an interview. I always say this, right? Every day is an interview. It's not when you're ready to sit down and do business. If I see that you are constantly late to every single thing, you know what I mean? And then you come to me and you want to do business, that means that you're going to be late in business as well. That doesn't work for me. You know what I'm saying? People show who they are in just their everyday interactions. And that gives us an inside scope on, okay, can I see myself working with this person because these are the things that I'm noticing that they present. And if it's not like, okay, well, it's not too low down on the ladder, they still have some stronger strengths. What are we willing to go with and be like, I can work with this. This is okay. Or what are we willing to be like, yeah, nah, based on how I'm seeing these things, this isn't going to work out right for me, type of thing.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, I'm curious about that, because we've been kicking around sort of the idea of, is there a self-assessment you could take to give you more insight to then when you're talking with people about potentially collaborating as co-founders on a project, you sort of know, and whatever it is, Myers-Briggs, the color wheel, any one of those sort of leadership style assessments. I'm just curious, because I think that's where potentially, there's opportunities for collaboration. And then just in my own experience, there's been some folks that I've like worked with in the past where they're like, come on, let's build something. And I'm like, you have no follow through. Like, you're great at ideas, but like, we have a follow-up meeting and I'm like, hey, did you do progress? And it's like, nope, I was distracted by all this other stuff. And I'm kind of going, okay, well, for me, I prefer a little more of a linear thought process than being all over the map. And that's just my own preference. But then after a few like sync up meetings, I'm like, okay, this project with this particular person and their work style, like, we're just too different for us to make progress without, one of us or both of us getting frustrated.
Yeah.
So
that's a very, very great insight and very valid points. Because again, if you're already noticing it, pay attention to the intuition.
Yeah.
It's typically when we're like, well, I'll just give it a try, and then we're like, dang it, I knew I shouldn't have. And even if it's like I can't work with this person, I don't see us being able to partner on this type of thing, but we may be able to partner on this because it doesn't require them to put in a lot of A, B, C, D. You know, they just need A. And I know that that's a strength for them. We can partner on a lower scale with things if that's something that you feel, you know, comfortable with. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
No, it makes sense. Some of it was trial and error. And you're like, okay, you'd be awesome at a trade show because, you know, his previous experience, they were like a sales rep. You know, but for some of the strategic planning where you need a little more quiet time and focus, that just was not, you know, up their alley.
And that's definitely one of the biggest things about, you know, business. It's like, you don't know until you actually go through it, right? And sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's muddy, it's a storm, and sometimes it's sunny. You know, you don't know what works. And again, you get the opportunity to evaluate like, okay, this is what I can do differently, or this works, this doesn't work, you know, type of thing. But like you said, being able to get a heads up to minimize that conflict is always going to be best.
Yep. Adam, did you have any questions?
No, it was excellent. I'm kind of lucky because I'm a one-man show, but you know, I've heard horror stories, so that's all that really needs to be said. I've experienced a couple as an employee where co-founders had a falling out, and they were pretty far along, you know, a couple years in. And then, like you said, motivations change. One wants to, you know, go grow the company huge, and the other wants it to be a little more local. And, you know, whatever those fundamental disagreements are that change over time. But, you know, I've had a sort of a back row seat to some of that where co-founders start fighting, and then, you know, one of them is like, okay, I'm going to push the other one out, and you're kind of going, not great for the company involved, because a lot of the team is, you know, sort of trying to work with both sides, right? You know, there's sort of equal co-founder stake, but, you know, one might be CEO and one might be COO or CTO, right? Like as far as the organizational hierarchy goes. But yeah, so just curious to see, because as folks are trying to form up teams, you know, if there's some early indicators, mini projects, or just an assessment for their own awareness, or what they might not be aware of. You know, I'd be curious to maybe see if we want to find some folks in the founders group that potentially want to do some of these surveys just as guinea pigs, to be like, hey, I did the survey, here's my communication style. And then, like, you know, see if there's any sort of, like you said, tips or studies around which match well and which, you know, could potentially clash more often. I don't know what that is. You know, introvert versus extrovert, that's, you know, a very easy one to sort of observe and go, okay, I can do the trade show all day long and be at the booth giving the spiel, but like at the end of the day, I'm exhausted and want to just go home. And like the sales reps are like, let's go to the bar after party. And I'm kind of going, I don't have the energy for this. Like, I'm introverted by default. So, you know, that's kind of where I've seen that a little bit, but it would be kind of interesting to see, you know, what those assessments, which ones could mesh well. And whether that might be a part when people are like, hey, I'm looking to form a team. You know, is there some sort of short assessment, you know, that could give you an early indicator of here's just your style, and here, you know, is a style that you might work better with versus, you know, not as well.
And then just kind of jumping in there.
Yeah.
I always think about like when, you know, in college days and you have dorms and your roommates and things like that, and everyone's like, oh great, like we're all here, fun. And then after a while, it's like 6 weeks in, it's like, okay, this isn't working. I don't really like how this person is not clean, or they don't, you know, whatever, you know, type of thing. So yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
So
excellent. Anyone else have any questions?
I think we might be the only three on the call at the moment. Shannon had to drop for another call, but
yeah, I think so.
No worries. All right. Excellent. So, Rolanda, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I know this is probably going to be one of the top watched webinars on our YouTube channel, I'm sure, because
Yeah. And if there's ever any other questions and we want to do a part 2 or something like that, like feel free to, let me know. And so Mark, I'm always going to suggest having a therapist that can assist with things that come up. Because I mean, I've seen community members that have businesses, and some have had like group practices type of thing where they have staff under their belts, and just the different personality types of individuals that come to work, but they really don't want to work, or they're dealing with whatever at home. So they're trying to stretch out the clock and the finances and all of that. It's very triggering. It's very triggering across the board, where I've also seen the other side of it, where it's like, I'm solo business owner. I know that I need the help, but I have issues with trust, and this is how it's always kind of been. And so trying to talk all of these parties through their own like assessment of self, like where does that come from? Because if we're able to look at the root cause of where these apprehensions, these concerns, these feelings are coming from, get to the root cause of it and how it's showing up for them presently within business, speaking through that, we're able to build a different, avenue and help them engage with others that are around them. But I do feel like it's a lot more pressure and challenging when you are the owner of the business, because now you're overseeing, it's not just their livelihood, it's yours as well, right? And so it's like, yeah, I'm passing out the paychecks, but you gotta make sure the stuff's still coming in. So yeah. So yeah, if we ever need to do a part 2 or anything like that, let me know.
Excellent. Will do.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe the first video will prompt some questions in the discussion groups, right? And so they'll be like, what about this? What about this? What about this?
Yeah.
So maybe there's an opportunity to do a follow-up of like frequently asked questions from part 1 or something like that, right?
Yeah. And I'm definitely going to look into the quizzes, see what comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I can come up with.
Yeah, because I think on one of the Reddit forums for co-founders, someone else was saying like they had a background in psychology, and they had a practice, and more of their clients, they are based in Europe, but more of their clients were starting to be founders that are like talking to them to get sort of therapy around, hey, here's my business, here's my potential co-founder and the conflicts there. So he was just sort of kind of asking the forum like, hey, is this kind of a thing? Because this is where his clients are sort of making more requests than sort of the standard counseling clients that he had worked with in the past. So I was curious to sort of, learn a little bit more about that. Gosh, there's a whole dynamic between, co-founders and problem solving there that potentially, like you said, there's probably been some studies around it or some self-assessment quizzes that even just let you do a 5-minute quiz to figure out, hey, these two personalities would be reasonably compatible, on like a 1 to 100 compatibility scale or something.
Yeah.
Just how they approach stuff might be an interesting one if there's some studies or surveys around that as pertains to sort of entrepreneurship and sort of co-founders. I'd be curious. Maybe some other folks also watching this first session might wonder and come up with some frequently asked questions for a part 2. That would be awesome.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Sounds amazing.
All right, terrific. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, you already put up your contact slide?
Yes, I did. Here, let me go back to it. Let me go all the way back. Yeah, it's right here at the bottom.
Terrific. All right, I'll give it a second or two so people take a screenshot. And then outside of that, we should be all set.
All righty.
So, all right. Thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. Everyone who's watching, I appreciate you as well. And have a fantastic day. And we will see y'all in the server.